What if I told you that the greatest psychologist of the 20th century discovered something profound about feminine power that society has been hiding from you? Carl Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, and what he uncovered about the awakened woman is nothing short of revolutionary. These aren't just theories. These are laws. Laws that, once understood, cannot be unlearned. In this video, we're diving deep into the 7 unbreakable laws of the awakened woman according to Jungian psychology. And I promise you, by the end of this journey, you'll never see yourself or the women in your life the same way again. Whether you're a woman seeking to step into your full power or someone who wants to understand the incredible depth of feminine consciousness, this video will transform your perspective. So grab a notebook, settle in, because what you're about to learn took Jung a lifetime to discover, and it might just change yours. Let's begin. Before we dive into these laws, we need to understand the man behind them. Carl Gustav Jung wasn't just any psychologist. He was a pioneer who dared to explore the parts of the human psyche that others ignored, the shadow, the unconscious, the archetypes that live within all of us. Unlike his contemporary Freud, who reduced everything to sexual impulses, Jung saw something deeper. He recognized that within every human being exists a vast, unexplored landscape of the unconscious mind. And within this landscape, he discovered something remarkable about the feminine principle. Jung noticed that society had created a massive imbalance. The masculine principle, logic, action, external achievement had dominated for centuries. But the feminine principle, intuition, depth, inner wisdom had been suppressed, ignored, even demonized. But here's what Jung understood. You cannot suppress half of human consciousness without consequences. And the awakened woman, she's the one who reclaims what was lost. Now, let's explore these 7 unbreakable laws. Law 1. The law of individuation. The first and perhaps most important law is the law of individuation. Jung believed that the primary task of every human being is to become who they truly are, not who society says they should be, not who their parents wanted them to be, not who their culture demands they be, but their authentic self. For women, this law is especially powerful and especially challenging. From the moment a girl is born, she's bombarded with expectations. Be pretty, but not too pretty. Be smart, but not threatening. Be ambitious, but don't neglect your family. Be strong, but stay feminine. Be sexual, but not too sexual. These contradictions create what Jung called the persona, the mask we wear to be acceptable to society. And here's the tragic part. Many women spend their entire lives perfecting this mask, never realizing they've lost themselves beneath it. The awakened woman recognizes this trap. She understands that individuation, becoming your true self, requires the courage to remove the mask, even when it's uncomfortable, even when people don't like what they see, even when it costs her relationships, jobs, or social acceptance. Think about Sarah, a successful lawyer who spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder. She wore the perfect suits, said the right things, played the game flawlessly. But inside she felt hollow. At 40, she had a breakdown that Jung would call a spiritual crisis. The moment when the unconscious screams, "This isn't who you are." Sarah quit law and became an artist. People called her crazy. Her family was confused. But for the first time in her life, she felt alive. That's individuation. The shadow work required. Here's what most people don't tell you about. Individuation. It requires facing your shadow. Jung defined the shadow as all the parts of yourself you've rejected, denied, or hidden away. For many women, the shadow contains anger they were told wasn't ladylike, ambition they were told was selfish, sexuality they were told was inappropriate, darkness they were told to suppress. The awakened woman doesn't fear her shadow. She integrates it. She reclaims her anger as power, her ambition as purpose, her sexuality as sacred, her darkness as depth. Practical application. Ask yourself, who am I beneath the roles I play? What parts of myself have I been hiding? What would I do if I wasn't afraid of judgment? This is where individuation begins. Law 2. The law of the anima. The second law takes us deeper into Jung's most fascinating concepts, the anima and animus. Jung discovered that within every man exists a feminine aspect called the anima, and within every woman exists a masculine aspect called the animus. These aren't just metaphors. They're real psychological forces that shape how we think, feel, and relate to the world. For the awakened woman, understanding the animus is crucial. Your animus is your inner masculine. It's your capacity for logic, action, assertion, and achievement. It's the part of you that says, I can do this. I deserve this. I will make this happen. But here's where it gets interesting. In women who haven't awakened, the animus often manifests in toxic ways. Jung called this the negative animus. It's that harsh inner critic that sounds like, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? You'll never succeed. You're too much, or you're not enough. Sound familiar? This negative animus isn't your true masculine energy. It's the internalized voice of patriarchal oppression. It's every authority figure who doubted you, every system that limited you, every message that said you were less than. The awakened animus. The awakened woman transforms her relationship with the animus. Instead of being tyrannized by negative voices, she develops a positive, integrated masculine energy. This looks like setting powerful boundaries without apology, taking decisive action toward her goals, speaking her truth clearly and directly, protecting her energy and her peace, competing and achieving without shame. Consider Maya Angelou, a woman who embodied both profound feminine wisdom and fierce masculine strength. She could write with devastating emotional truth, feminine, while also commanding stages, speaking truth to power, and refusing to be diminished, masculine. That's integration. The balance. But here's the crucial part. The awakened woman doesn't abandon her feminine nature to embrace the masculine. She integrates both. She knows when to be receptive and when to be assertive, when to nurture and when to conquer, when to flow and when to fight. This isn't about becoming more masculine, it's about becoming whole. Jung would say that the goal isn't to be masculine or feminine, but to be both in conscious harmony. Reflection question. How do you relate to your inner masculine? Is it a critic or an ally? Does it support your dreams or sabotage them? The awakened woman makes her animus her greatest advocate. Law 3. The law of the collective unconscious. Now we enter one of Jung's most revolutionary ideas, the collective unconscious. Jung proposed something radical, that beneath our personal unconscious, there exists a deeper layer shared by all humanity. This collective unconscious contains archetypes, universal patterns and images that appear in every culture, every era, every mythology. For the awakened woman, this law changes everything. The feminine archetypes. Within the collective unconscious exist powerful feminine archetypes. The mother, nurturing, protective, life-giving, the maiden, innocent, curious, full of potential. The crone, wise, discerning, connected to death and rebirth. The warrior, fierce, protective, boundary-setting, the lover, sensual, passionate, connected, the queen, sovereign, powerful, self-assured, the mystic, spiritual, intuitive, transcendent. Here's what's profound. These aren't just metaphors or personality types. According to Jung, these are real psychological structures that live within every woman's psyche. The awakened woman recognizes these archetypes within herself and learns to access them consciously. The trap of one-dimensional living. Society often tries to force women into one archetype. Be only the nurturing mother. Be only the innocent maiden. Be only the desirable lover. But here's the truth. You contain multitudes. The woman stuck in only the mother archetype might give endlessly but never receive. The woman trapped in the maiden might avoid responsibility and growth. The woman limited to the lover might lose herself in relationships. Integration of archetypes. The awakened woman knows she has access to all these energies. She can nurture her children in the morning, mother. Negotiate fiercely in a business meeting, warrior queen. Connect intimately with her partner at night, lover. Seek spiritual truth in meditation, mystic. Share hard-won wisdom with younger women, crone. She doesn't fragment herself into acceptable pieces. She owns her complexity. Think of the women throughout history who embodied multiple archetypes. Cleopatra was queen, lover, and warrior. Joan of Arc was maiden, warrior, and mystic. Frida Kahlo was lover, artist, and wounded healer. These women were magnetic precisely because they refused to be one thing. They embraced their archetypal richness. The collective power. But here's where this law becomes truly unbreakable. When you tap into these archetypes, you're not accessing just your individual power, you're accessing the accumulated wisdom and strength of every woman who came before you. You're connecting to a river of feminine power that flows through all of time. The courage of every woman who stood up. The wisdom of every woman who endured. The love of every woman who nurtured. The rage of every woman who said, enough. This is what Jung meant by the collective unconscious. You're never alone. You carry the strength of all women within you. Practical exercise. Close your eyes and ask, which archetype am I suppressing? Which one am I overusing? Which one am I afraid of? Which one do I need right now? The awakened woman answers honestly and adjusts accordingly. Law 4. The law of integration. This brings us to the fourth law, the law of integration. If there's one thing Jung understood better than anyone, it's this. Wholeness requires integrating all parts of ourselves, especially the parts we've been taught to reject. For women, this law is revolutionary because we've been taught to split ourselves into acceptable and unacceptable pieces. The splitting. From childhood, the message is clear. Good girls are sweet. Reject anger. Feminine women are gentle. Reject aggression. Worthy women are selfless. Reject self-interest. Attractive women are pleasant. Reject difficult emotions. Spiritual women are light. Reject darkness. This creates what Jung called psychological splitting. We exile huge parts of ourselves into the shadow, thinking we can just be the good parts. But here's the psychological truth Jung discovered. What you reject doesn't disappear. It goes underground and runs your life from the shadows. Shadow manifestations. When women reject their shadow, it manifests as passive aggression, rejected anger coming out sideways, people-pleasing addiction, rejected self-interest becoming resentment, emotional volatility, rejected feelings exploding unexpectedly, projection, seeing in others what we deny in ourselves, self-sabotage, the shadow sabotaging the persona's goals. Consider Jane, who prided herself on being the nice one. She never got angry, never said no, never caused conflict. But mysteriously, her relationships kept failing. Why? Because her rejected anger would leak out in subtle criticism, withdrawal, and emotional unavailability. Her shadow was running the show. The integration process. The awakened woman does the hard work of integration. This means 1. Acknowledging the shadow. She admits, yes, I have rage. Yes, I can be selfish. Yes, I have dark thoughts. Yes, I'm capable of cruelty. This isn't confession. It's recognition of full humanity. 2. Understanding the gift, every shadow quality contains a gift. Anger is boundaries and justice. Selfishness is self-preservation and autonomy. Darkness is depth and mystery. Cruelty is discernment and protection. 3. Conscious expression instead of erupting unconsciously. She expresses shadow qualities consciously and appropriately. Anger becomes powerful boundary setting. Selfishness becomes healthy self-care. Darkness becomes creative depth. Ruthlessness becomes strategic protection. The light and dark feminine. In Jungian terms, the awakened woman integrates both the light feminine and the dark feminine. The light feminine is nurturing, open, collaborative, gentle, receptive, flowing, healing, connecting, creating. The dark feminine is destructive, of what no longer serves, mysterious, hidden, powerful, fierce, protective, primal, sexual, wild, untamed. Most women are comfortable with the light but terrified of the dark. But Jung would say, you need both. The light without the dark is naive and powerless. The dark without the light is destructive and isolated. Think of the goddess Kali in Hindu mythology. She's both creator and destroyer, nurturing mother and fierce warrior. She doesn't split herself into acceptable pieces. She is whole, containing both light and dark, and that's precisely why she's powerful. The integration paradox. Here's what's beautiful. When you integrate your shadow, you don't become darker, you become more authentically light. Because your light is no longer a performance or a denial. It's a conscious choice made by a whole person who knows her full range. The awakened woman can be gentle because she knows she can be fierce. She can be vulnerable because she knows she can protect herself. She can be loving because she's not afraid of her own rage. That's integration. That's power. Law 5. The law of psychological death and rebirth. The fifth law might be the most challenging. The law of psychological death and rebirth. Jung understood something that most people resist. True transformation requires death. Not physical death, but psychological death, the death of who you thought you were. And for the awakened woman, this law becomes a sacred cycle, not a one-time event. The death phase. In Jungian psychology, there are moments in life when everything falls apart. Relationships end. Identities crumble. Beliefs shatter. Dreams die. Most people experience these moments as pure tragedy. They resist, they cling, they try desperately to return to normal. But the awakened woman recognizes these moments for what they truly are, initiations. These are the moments when your old self, the one who needed to believe certain stories, maintain certain illusions, avoid certain truths, must die so a truer self can emerge. Think about the caterpillar and the chrysalis. There's a moment during metamorphosis when the caterpillar essentially dissolves into a kind of biological soup. Its entire structure breaks down. If you could ask the caterpillar in that moment, "How are you?" the answer would be, "I'm dying." But it's not dying. It's transforming. That's what psychological death feels like for women going through awakening. Everything they built their identity on, good girl, perfect mother, successful career woman, desirable partner, starts to dissolve. And it's terrifying. The dark night of the soul. Jung borrowed this phrase from St. John of the Cross, and it perfectly describes the death phase. This is when nothing makes sense anymore. Old coping mechanisms stop working. Previous sources of meaning feel hollow. You don't recognize yourself. You question everything you once believed. This isn't depression, though it might include depression. This is spiritual emergency. The death of oneself before the birth of another. Society's resistance. Here's what makes this law so difficult for women. Society pathologizes the death phase. When a woman enters this transformation, she's often labeled having a breakdown, going through a phase, being dramatic, needing medication, having a midlife crisis. The medical establishment wants to diagnose it. Her family wants to fix it. Her friends want her to snap out of it. But the awakened woman knows this isn't something to fix. This is something to surrender to. The rebirth phase. After death comes rebirth. After disintegration comes integration at a higher level. But here's the crucial part. You can't control what emerges from the ashes. You can't decide in advance who you'll become. That's not how rebirth works. The awakened woman surrenders to the process. She trusts that whatever is dying needed to die, and whatever is being born wants to live. What emerges? After psychological death and rebirth, women often report unshakable inner authority, not borrowed from external sources. Fierce clarity about what matters. Inability to tolerate inauthenticity. Deep compassion because they've been through the fire. Reduced fear of judgment. Connection to something larger than ego. They've died to the small self and been reborn as something truer. The cycle continues, but here's the really profound part of this law. This death and rebirth cycle doesn't happen once. It's not a one-time transformation. The awakened woman recognizes that life calls us to die and be reborn multiple times. When we leave our parents' home, when we commit to partnership, when we become mothers, when we lose someone we love, when we change careers, when we age, when we face our mortality. Each transition requires letting go of who we were to become who we're becoming. The awakened woman doesn't resist these deaths. She sees them as sacred initiations into greater depth, wisdom, and power. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. The awakened woman faces her soul. She walks through the pain. She allows the death. And she welcomes the rebirth. Law 6. The Law of Sacred Intuition. The sixth law speaks to one of women's most powerful and most suppressed gifts, the law of sacred intuition. Jung recognized that intuition wasn't some mystical woo-woo nonsense. It was a legitimate function of consciousness. And he noticed that women, generally speaking, had particularly strong access to this intuitive function. But here's the tragedy. We live in a world that has systematically devalued, dismissed, and demonized feminine intuition. The suppression. For centuries, women's intuition has been called hysteria, dismissed as emotion, labeled irrational, accused of being witchcraft, reduced to women's intuition, said dismissively, overridden by male logic and authority. Millions of women have learned to distrust the most powerful guidance system they possess. What is intuition really? From a Jungian perspective, intuition is direct perception of the unconscious. It's information that comes not from conscious logical analysis, but from the vast database of the unconscious mind. Your unconscious is processing thousands of pieces of information. Every second, body language, environmental cues, pattern recognition, accumulated wisdom, archetypal knowledge. Intuition is when this information breaks through into consciousness as a knowing. It's not magical. It's actually more intelligent than conscious thinking because it's processing exponentially more data. Think about every time you've had a gut feeling about someone and ignored it, only to later discover you were right. Or when you knew something was wrong with your child before any symptoms appeared. Or when you felt you shouldn't take that job and later found out the company was toxic. That's not coincidence. That's your unconscious screaming information at you that your conscious mind couldn't yet articulate. The awakened woman's intuition. The awakened woman reclaims intuition as sacred technology. She doesn't just occasionally listen to her gut. She develops it as a refined instrument. This means 1. Distinguishing true intuition from fear. Not every feeling is intuition. Fear can masquerade as intuitive knowing. The awakened woman learns the difference. Fear is contracted, urgent, desperate. Intuition is expansive, clear, calm, even when it's warning. 2. Honoring the body's wisdom. Jung understood that the body holds unconscious knowledge. The awakened woman pays attention to what makes her body contract or expand, where she feels tension or ease, what her body is communicating before her mind catches up. 3. Trusting nonlinear knowing. Intuition doesn't follow a BC logic. It jumps from A to Z and is right. The awakened woman trusts these leaps even when she can't explain them logically. 4. Acting on intuitive hits. This is crucial. Intuition is only powerful when you act on it. The awakened woman has trained herself to respect her inner knowing, enough to make decisions based on it, even when others question her. The consequences of ignoring intuition. When women systematically override their intuition to please others, follow rules, or appear rational, the consequences are severe. Staying in toxic relationships too long, taking jobs that crush their spirit, ignoring health symptoms until crisis, betraying themselves repeatedly, chronic anxiety, the unconscious trying to get through, depression, giving up on inner guidance. Jung would say, when you ignore your intuition consistently, you're at war with your own unconscious, and you will always lose that war. Intuition and the collective. But here's something profound. The awakened woman's intuition isn't just personal. Remember the collective unconscious? Her intuition can tap into that. This is why some women seem to know things about people they just met. Why mothers have premonitions about their children. Why certain women throughout history were oracles, healers, and seers. They weren't supernatural. They were deeply connected to the intuitive function and the collective unconscious. Reclaiming sacred intuition. The awakened woman makes peace with being called too sensitive, too suspicious, too cautious, too intuitive, too knowing. She understands that these criticisms usually come from people who have lost connection to their own inner guidance and are uncomfortable with hers. Start small. Notice what your body tells you about people and places. Track your intuitive hits and their accuracy. Make small decisions based on feeling rather than logic. Journal about your inner knowing. Trust yourself a little more each day. Over time, your intuition becomes your most trusted advisor. Jung believed that integrated intuition combined with developed thinking created the most powerful consciousness. The awakened woman develops both. She thinks clearly and feels deeply. She analyzes and she knows. She uses logic and intuition. That's wholeness. That's power. Law 7. The law of authentic sovereignty. We arrive at the seventh and final law, the law of authentic sovereignty. This is where everything comes together. This is the culmination of the awakened woman's journey. What is sovereignty? Sovereignty means self-governance. It means being your own highest authority. It means bowing to no one while respecting everyone. It means internal validation rather than external approval. Jung would say sovereignty is the natural result of individuation. When you've done the work, integrated your shadow, balanced your masculine and feminine, connected to the archetypes, survived death and rebirth, reclaimed your intuition, you emerge sovereign. The difference from independence. This isn't the pseudo-independence of I don't need anyone. That's often just defended wounding. True sovereignty is, I am complete within myself, and I can connect deeply with others. I don't need you to complete me, but I choose to share my completeness with you. The sovereign woman isn't afraid of dependence or interdependence, because her core is unshakable. What sovereignty looks like. 1. Internal validation. She no longer needs external approval to know her worth. She's done the inner work to validate herself. 2. Unshakable boundaries. She knows where she ends and others begin. She protects her energy, her time, her peace without guilt. 3. Authentic self-expression. She says what she means. She means what she says. There's no gap between her inner truth and outer expression. 4. Comfortable with consequences. She makes choices knowing she can handle whatever consequences come. She's not controlled by fear of outcomes. 5. Emotional self-regulation. She doesn't need others to manage her emotions. She can sit with discomfort, process her feelings, and maintain her center. 6. Clarity of purpose. She knows why she's here. Her purpose comes from within, not from what others think she should do. 7. Non-reactivity. She responds rather than reacts. She's not controlled by others' opinions, emotions, or behaviors. Consider Rosa Parks. Her refusal to give up her seat wasn't reactive anger or rebellion. It was sovereign authority. She knew her worth. She knew her right, and no external authority could make her believe otherwise. That's what sovereignty looks like in action. The threat of sovereign women. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Sovereign women threaten systems built on women's compliance. A sovereign woman can't be manipulated, won't settle for less, challenges unjust rules, refuses to shrink, models power for other women, changes everything around her. This is why society works so hard to prevent women's sovereignty. Every message that says, be smaller, quieter, more acceptable, more pleasing, less threatening is designed to prevent sovereignty. The collective impact. But here's what's revolutionary. When one woman becomes truly sovereign, she gives permission to every woman around her. Sovereignty is contagious. When your daughter sees you set boundaries, she learns she can too. When your friend sees you leave a toxic relationship, she finds courage to examine hers. When your colleague sees you speak truth to power, she realizes she can use her voice. Jung believed in the collective unconscious and sovereign. Women ripple through that collective field, changing it for everyone. The final integration. The law of sovereignty is where all the other laws converge. You've individuated Law 1. You know who you are. You've integrated masculine and feminine, Law 2. You're whole. You've accessed collective archetypes, Law 3. You're connected to ancient power. You've integrated your shadow, Law 4. You're no longer at war with yourself. You've died and been reborn, Law 5. You're not afraid of transformation. You've reclaimed your intuition, Law 6. You trust your inner knowing. And now you stand sovereign, complete, powerful, free. Not because someone gave you permission. Not because you finally achieved external validation. Not because you're perfect or have everything figured out, but because you've done the inner work to become your own authority. The awakened woman. This is who Jung saw when he looked deeply at the potential of feminine consciousness. A woman who is whole, not fragmented. A woman who is integrated, not split. A woman who is connected, not isolated. A woman who is powerful, not powerless. A woman who is sovereign, not subservient. She carries both light and dark. She holds both strength and softness. She accesses both logic and intuition. She expresses both fire and water. She is not one-dimensional. She is infinite. These 7 laws aren't just psychological theory. They're a roadmap to feminine awakening that Jung spent his life discovering. The law of individuation calls you to become yourself. The law of the anima challenges you to integrate your masculine. The law of the collective unconscious connects you to ancient power. The law of integration makes you whole. The law of death and rebirth transforms you repeatedly. The law of sacred intuition restores your inner knowing. The law of sovereignty crowns you as your own authority. Jung believed that the next evolution of human consciousness required the awakening of the feminine principle, not to dominate the masculine, but to balance what has been dangerously out of balance for millennia. Every woman who does this inner work, who awakens to these laws, who becomes sovereign, she's not just changing her own life. She's changing the collective consciousness. She's healing the wounds of generations. She's creating a new template for what women can be. So here's my question for you. Which of these laws is calling to you right now? Which one do you most need to embody? Drop a comment below and let me know. If this video resonated with you, please like it and share it with a woman who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel because we're going deep into psychology, consciousness, and transformation.